All right, back to our foundation series. We've talked about a lot of different people, and the last person we just hit on was Noah. Noah is a massive figure, and he did obviously some amazing things, not only in his life, but obviously the ark, all the animals being saved, his family being saved, and then beginning to procreate and fill the earth once again, right? Now, about 400 and so on years later, we actually get our next really big biblical figure. So imagine Noah has gone through all the ark, I was going to say arc, like a character arc, but that didn't make any sense. He's gone through all the ark journey, and now he's on the other side. He's beginning to procreate. His sons are beginning to have descendants, and so on and so forth. They're going to continue on. So we see the whole descendants of Noah right here in this chapter, in chapter 10. Obviously, we're not going to read through all of this, but we do know that he had 3 sons, and each of them had a wife, but his sons were Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And so they began to procreate and having many descendants that kept on coming down. The only one that's super important for what we're going to talk about today is the descendants of Shem, who basically comes down to our next huge biblical figure. But first, let's talk about this. Of course, over 400 years, you're going to have a lot of propagation of people, right? If a generation is every 15 to 20 years, then you're going to have many generations that are kind of coming through and growing and growing and growing throughout this time. So 400 plus years later, there's a lot of people that are here. So now, let's read about the Tower of Babel, then we'll get into our next biblical figure. Now, the whole earth had one language and the same words. This would be so cool, right? Part of me wishes that we all spoke the same language. It would be so cool. And as people migrated from the east, they found a plain in the land of Shinar and settled there. And they said to one another, "Come, let us make bricks and burn them thoroughly." And they had brick for stone, and bitumen for mortar. And they said, "Come, let us build ourselves a city and a tower, and its top, with its top in the heavens. And let us make a name for ourselves, lest we be dispersed over the face of the whole earth." So again, this is a moment, like just like we talked about with the fall, right? Satan is like, hey, if you eat this, you're going to become like God, right? In the same way, these people are trying to build the Tower of Babel, not to glorify God, but to glorify themselves. And so God really does not like this, because they're trying to bring themselves up to a place of God, right? Not like they're going to actually build a tower and reach heaven and dethrone God, but the fact is that they are trying to do this because they think they are so great that they can build this tower and they can do it in their own strength. It's not for the glory of God, it's for the glory of themselves. So then we see here, so the Lord dispersed them because of their hearts, because of where they were. Verse 7, "Come, let us go down there and confuse their language so they may not understand one another's speech." So in the Tower of Babel, the reason why we use the word Babel today as like nonsense is because these people were building the Tower of Babel, and as they're working with one another, they begin to basically speak different languages. So they're not able to communicate with each other anymore. So then the different people that are speaking the same languages begin to group up in groups and go form different nations during that time. Again, this is after Noah and right before our next biblical figure here, okay? So therefore, its name was called Babel because their Lord confused the language of all the earth, and from there the Lord dispersed them over the face of the earth. The purpose of this, because they were kind of having their own purpose of wanting to build this tower to kind of glorify themselves, God is using this as a moment to disperse them over the earth so that there would be a wider area of people, and so they wouldn't all congregate in one area to glorify themselves, right? Again, sometimes scarcity leads us towards God, right? When we have less resources, we have less people, we have less affluence, it leads us towards God a lot of the time. And so let's see here, we're talking about Shem's descendants now. So this is Noah's son, Shem, right? Shem fathers all these people. We're not going to go through the whole genealogy. You can definitely go through that on your own. But the important piece is right here, when Terah had lived 70 years, he fathered Abraham, Nahor, and Haran. So this is really important because this is where we get our next, our next big biblical figure, Abram, okay? And now you probably know him as Abraham. We're going to talk about that in just a second. So Terah's descendants here, they are Terah fathered Abram, Norah, and Haran fathered Lot. Okay, so these are the two characters that we're really kind of paying attention to in this section here. Actually, there's three characters, one that I'm going to introduce you to in a second as well. So Abram and Nahor took wives. Okay, the name of Abram's wife was Sarai, and the name of Norah's wife was Milcah. Okay, so if we're following this, and I know it's kind of difficult, if we're following this, Sarai is actually basically Abram's sister. Okay, so we read this here. Terah took Abram his son and let the son of Haran, his grandson, and Sarai, his daughter-in-law, his son Abram's wife, and they went forth together from Ur to the Chaldeans to go into the land of Canaan. But when they came to Haran, they settled there. The days of Terah were 205 years. Terah died in Haran. Okay, let's continue on. So we've been introduced to Abram, we've been introduced to Sarai, and we've been introduced to Lot. Okay, so those are the three that were really important, that are really important in this section. Let's go to Genesis chapter 12. So now the Lord said to Abram, "Go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land that I will show you." So the Lord is just coming to Abram, okay? We haven't really seen much of what God is doing during this other time. We know that obviously Noah trusted the Lord, and he, I'm sure, passed that down through generations and generations and generations. So we know that they would know of the Lord, but we don't know what kind of interactions they would have with the Lord during this time. But here, the Lord comes to Abram, and he says, "Go from your country and basically go to where I'm telling you to go." He says, "I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great so that you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and him who dishonors you I will curse, and in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed." Okay, so this is the father of Israel. Okay, so if you talk to an Israeli today, they will talk about this verse to you, I guarantee it. Okay, if you talk about Israel in general. In you, all of the families of the earth shall be blessed. And so Israeli people believe that their people, part of what they do is they make the best technology, they make the best equipment, they make the best pretty much everything in order for them to bless the rest of the earth with these things. And so you'll see in Israel even today, there are many different businesses and areas in which Israel makes some really, really amazing things, and they're able to share it with the rest of the world. I think this is a piece of what God is talking about here, as well as they're blessing the rest of the earth. If you're liking this video so far and you want to continue to see us making videos like this, then we could really use your help on patreon.com. This is the best way to help support us with $5, $10, $25, or even $50 a month if you really, really want to. But honestly, this is what keeps us going, because sometimes YouTube, well, just doesn't show our videos to people, or it kind of is blocked in the algorithm for whatever reason. So we could really use your help if you want to support us right here on The Snipe Life. So Abram went as the Lord had told him, and Lot went with him. So Abram went and Lot went as well. Abram was 75 years old when he departed from Haran. So then we see as Abram took Sarai as his wife, and Lot his brother's son, and their possessions that they had gathered, and the people that they had acquired in Haran, and they set out to go to the land of Canaan. When they came to the land of Canaan, Abram passed through the land to the place at Shechem, to the oak of Moreh. At the time the Canaanites were in the land, the Lord appeared to Abram and said, "To your offspring I will give this land." So basically, Abram is going from the land that he was into the land of the Canaanites, and God is telling him, "I am going to give you this land. I am going to give your descendants, I'm going to give you this land," okay? So really, really important. We see as that continues on and continues on. We're not going to go through the whole story of Abraham tonight, but I wanted to give you an idea of who he is here. So let's keep on reading. So Abram and Sarai in Egypt. Now there was a famine in the land, so Abram went down to Egypt to sojourn there, for the famine was severe in the land of Canaan where he was previously. This is the land where Israel is today. And then he went down to Egypt because he needed food and stuff because there was a famine. When he was about to enter Egypt, he said to Sarai, his wife, I know you are a woman beautiful in appearance, and when the Egyptians see you, they will say, this is his wife. Then they will kill me because they want to take her, basically. But they will let you live. Say you are my sister, that I may go well, that it may go well with me because of you, and that my life may be spared for your sake. So essentially, Abraham is lying here. This is one of the things that Abraham does a couple of times, is he says to his wife, no, tell them that you're my sister, because, which is technically true, but it's not really true because she's his wife, right? It's a weird relationship that they have here. Basically, he's telling her to kind of obscure the truth in order for them to have an easier time. This happens a couple of times, and both times this becomes a pretty big issue for Abram and Sarai. We're going to continue on, keep on going past. Here we see as Abram and Lot actually separate. This is where we see Lot actually going towards Sodom and Gomorrah and living there. This is a whole thing that happens later on. We're not going to go over this, but definitely check this out as well. Kind of giving you an overview of Abram, okay? Abram then rescues Lot. So we see as basically Sodom and Gomorrah is in, it's just defiled. It's disgusting. There's a lot of evil things that are happening there. And Abram is able to save Lot from that. And it's a crazy thing that happens, essentially. We'll keep on going on. I'm trying to skim over this because there's some points that I want to get to in a bit here. Abram is blessed by Melchizedek. Definitely a subject we're not going to get into today, but Melchizedek, if you do your own research, very, very interesting as well. Not something that we're going to get into today, but I wanted to talk about this. So Genesis chapter 15. So this is the covenant that God makes with Abram. Now, a covenant in the time of the Jews, let me explain this really quickly. Basically, if you're making a covenant in the time of the Jews, there are a couple different covenants that you could make. But in this specific covenant, this is a very serious covenant, okay? When you make a covenant, of course, it's a promise. But this promise in Jewish society, in Abram's society, in that time during the world, and even in Jewish society today, like it's to be taken very, very seriously. And so basically what God does is he lies out animals on the ground. He tells Abram to lie out animals on the ground and then cut them in half, basically creating, like you could envision almost like a wedding aisle, right? With guests on the right and left, right? Half of the animals on the right, half of the animals on the left. And then the two parties are to walk through the animals in order to declare that they will keep this promise. And the animals are symbolic of what will happen if someone breaks that promise, okay? So let's continue on here and kind of keep that in mind as we're going through. So after these things, the word of the Lord came to Abram in a vision. Fear not, Abram, I am your shield, your reward shall be very great. But Abram said, O Lord God, what will you give me? For I continue childless, and the heir of my house is Eliezer of Damascus. And Abram said, Behold, you have given me no offspring, and a member of my household will be my heir. And behold, the word of the Lord came to him, This man shall not be your heir. Your very own son shall be your heir. And he brought him outside and said, Look toward heaven, and number the stars if you are able to number them. Then he said to him, so shall your offspring be. So God is telling him, your offspring will be as numerous as the stars in the sky. This is a lot of offspring, right? Many, many, many people. And he believed the Lord, and he counted to him as righteousness. As he said to him, I am the Lord who brought you out from Ur of the Chaldeans to give you this land to possess. But he said, O Lord God, how am I to know that I shall possess it? He said to him, Bring me a heifer 3 years old, a female goat 3 years old, a ram 3 years old, a turtle dove, and a young pigeon. And he brought him all these, cut them in half, and laid each side over against the other. But he did not cut the birds in half. And when birds of prey came down on the carcasses, Abram drove them away. As the sun was going down, a deep sleep fell on Abram. And behold, dreadful and great darkness fell upon him. Then the Lord said to Abram, Know for certain that your offspring will be sojourners in a land that is not theirs, and will be servants there. And they will be afflicted for 400 years. He's talking about the imprisonment, basically, in Egypt, the enslavement in Egypt. But I will bring judgment on the nation that they serve, and afterward they shall come out with great possessions. As for you, you shall go to your fathers in peace. You shall be buried in a good old age, and they shall come back here in the 4th generation, for the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet complete. So again, continuing on, we're seeing this contract kind of coming. Abram has been put into a deep sleep. Darkness has covered him everywhere, and he's beginning to have this moment, okay? Let's keep on going. When the sun had gone down and it was dark, behold, a smoking fire pot and a flaming torch passed between these pieces. So this is the most important verse for me when I think about this section here, okay? Abram is basically, he's making this covenant with God, right? God is like, I want to make this covenant with you. And what happens in a covenant? Just like I told you, right? The animals are split left and right, and then the two people walk down the center, and the covenant is made together. They say, if I don't uphold my end of the covenant, I will die. If I don't uphold my end of the covenant, I will die, right? They both agree, and they go into the covenant. However, God puts Abram into a sleep here. And as Abram is awoken and sees this happening, he's surrounded by great darkness, and then he sees this smoking fire pot, right? How's it put here? He says, a flaming torch. So a smoking fire pot and a flaming torch, right? So this is the symbol of God that is walking through this covenant, right? So God himself has told Abram, no, I want you to sit on the side, and I'm going to complete this covenant. And what is he saying? He's saying, if I don't complete my end of the deal, I will die. But the cooler part is that he looks at Abram and he says, if you don't complete your part of the deal, I will die. So this, even from the very beginning of the Bible, is a foreshadowing of Christ. Abram is making this covenant with God, but Abram is not actually the one that has to hold the consequences for not holding up perfection, for not holding up being good enough. So it's a foreshadowing of Christ and how he affects our lives, because with Christ, we're not the ones that have to be good enough. We just have to surrender to him and rely on him to be good enough, which we know that he is because he's perfect. So I love this section here. Let's read a little bit more and we'll kind of go through here. On that day, the Lord made a covenant with Abram, saying, to your offspring I give this land, from the river of Egypt to the great river, the river Euphrates, the land of the Kenites, the Kizanites, blah, 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 blah. All those ites, right? We continue on. Now, eventually, Abram is not having any children. He's very upset about this. His wife is very upset about this. So eventually what happens is Abram actually has relations with a servant of his from Egypt called Hagar. Now, this was actually his wife, Sarai's idea, okay? He says, you go sleep with Hagar, and then we'll have a child through that. Maybe that's what God wanted us to do, right? Even though God explicitly told him that's not what was going to happen. So they disobey God, and they have a child named Ishmael. Ishmael then becomes the father of a nation that is against Abraham for the rest of time, essentially. Very, very intense things that are happening there. Continuing on, then we get Abraham in the covenant of circumcision. So this is where Abram's name changes from Abram to Abraham. So let me read through this a little bit, and I'm trying to give you just an overview of what we're talking about here. Let's see. Yep. Okay. When Abram was 99 years old, the Lord appeared to Abram and said to him, I am God Almighty. Walk before me and be blameless, that I may make my covenant between me and you. So this is another covenant that God is making with Abram, and may multiply you greatly. Then Abram fell on his face, and God said to him, behold, my covenant is with you, and you shall be the father of multitude of nations. No longer shall your name be called Abram, but your name shall be Abraham. For I have made you the father of a multitude of nations. And again, the name change here, again, we see this oftentimes in the Bible. The name change from Abram to Abraham is really, really, really important, because it changes the the way that he is looked at in the world, but also his identity as a person. So just like God is saying here, your name shall be Abraham, because I will make you a father of a multitude of nations. So I can't remember the exact phrasing here, but Abram basically means like not as much of a father, or not a father or whatever. But then Abraham means like basically father of multitudes, or father of many nations. I will make you exceedingly fruitful, and I will make you into nations, and kings shall come from you, and I will establish my covenant between me and you and your offspring after you throughout their generations, for an everlasting covenant to be God to you and to your offspring after you. And I will give you and your offspring after you the land of your sojournings, all the land of Canaan, for an everlasting possession, and I will be their God. Okay, so he keeps on going on. This is where we get the covenant of circumcision, okay? Every male among you shall be circumcised, right here. You shall be circumcised in the flesh of your foreskins, and it shall be a sign of the covenant between me and you. Now, God doesn't really care about your flesh, right? God doesn't really care that you're fleshly circumcised. It has become a symbol of who God is in your heart, right? So the males are circumcised because they belong to God, right? It's an image of belonging to God. And so this is a really, really big thing that happens with Abraham after this point. Now, there's a lot more that happens with Abraham, but this is where we get to Isaac. And Isaac is kind of the next biblical figure. I don't think we're going to spend a ton of time on Isaac, but Abraham here obviously has Isaac. His birth is promised to him in Sarai. And so Sarai, eventually, her name is changed as well. As for Sarai, your wife, you shall not call her name Sarai, but Sarah. So this is how we know them in history, is we don't call them Abram and Sarai anymore. We call them Abraham and Sarah, and we know that that those two are linked here, if that makes sense. And so we continue on. I know there's a lot of stuff here. Abraham is one of the most complex and big figures in the Old Testament. Obviously, there's a lot to kind of go over here. But Sarah changes her name, or Sarai is able to change her name from Sarai to Sarah. We see that taking place here. We see that God promises to give him a son. All the circumcision stuff happens. And then we see that, yes, eventually God brings that son to Abraham and Sarah. And we see that Isaac is born as well. All right, let's continue on. God rescues Lot from Sodom and Gomorrah. All that stuff there. We have Abraham and Abimelech. We'll get into that another time. Then we see the birth of Isaac. Okay, so important parts about Abraham. Let's break this down again so that we have it as clear as possible. Okay, so we have Noah. Noah has the ark. He goes through that whole journey. He goes through all of that stuff. God saves him on the other side and makes it an amazing moment for him and his family. Now, during the time of Noah, there is Noah, his wife, his 3 sons, and then the 3 wives that they have, right? So nine people? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8? 8 people? There we go, 8 people. So there's 8 people that are alive after the time of Noah, and then they begin to procreate beyond that, okay? And now hundreds and hundreds of years pass. There's a big Tower of Babel moment when all of these people are dispersed. So they're not one united nation of Noah anymore. They're then dispersed into a bunch of different nations. And then we see as God chooses one, Abram. And Abram is the one that listens to God and begins to go on this journey of trusting God over time. We see as he eventually begins to have a covenant with God later in life, and not only a covenant for him to be the father of many nations, but also for circumcision for that nation. Not only a circumcision physically, but a circumcision of the heart, to show that they trust God and they love God and they will follow God. That becomes the Israelite people, who we'll talk about a little bit later. We'll talk about where they get the name Israel from and how that kind of works. But at the end of this all, it's important that we understand that Abraham has Isaac, and then Isaac is going to be a father to 2 more people that are really, really important to this Old Testament section that we'll talk about another time. So next time we'll talk about Isaac, we'll talk about his sons and what all comes from that, because it's really, really important. But Abraham is the father of everything that God begins to do throughout this time. So I hope that makes sense. I hope you're a little bit more clear on kind of what's going on there. Definitely take some time to read through those sections of Genesis. It's about 10 chapters from chapter 11 to chapter 21. That's a really great section on Abraham, and that will give you most of the things that you're really looking for if you're looking for more clarity than this video could give you. So let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to talk to you more about it. Definitely let me know.